Welcome to the September 4th Guidelines Development Workshop for the 2027 Active Transportation Program. Before we start, I'm going to turn it over to Jaden to go over some workshop logistics.
All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the second cycle 8 Central Workshop. The CTC exists to make transportation planning, funding, and policy more understandable and accountable. Our workshops can take place in diverse locations around the state so that commissioners and staff can hear directly from our stakeholders around California. The workshop agenda is located on our website at www.catc.ca.gov. Live closed captioning is available on this webinar. Please select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of your screen. There are a number of language options available to choose from. Any document the CTC creates can be translated into any language you need. Simply email us at ctc@catc.ca.gov and we'll have them returned to you as quickly as possible. For all of our workshops, we encourage interaction with our stakeholders. There will be opportunity for questions and comments throughout this workshop. We will stop periodically throughout this workshop to address stakeholder questions. You should see the webinar control panel likely located on the bottom of your screen. There, you will find the Raise Hand and Q&A tabs. We encourage you to use the Raise Hand feature as soon as we reach the item to give the system time to acknowledge you. Commission staff will let you know when it's your turn to make your comment. Once you have been unmuted, please make sure to state your name and agency you are representing. Alternatively, you may use the Q&A tab to submit your question or comment. Commission staff will read that on your behalf. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link or phone number to access the webinar. These should not be shared with any other participant as this can create confusion for staff when making comments. Please do your best to be concise. Please make sure that your comments add new information. If you agree with the comments of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. If you face any technical difficulties, please reach out through the chat or the Q&A tab, and I will do my best to assist you. Thank you for joining us today. And a couple workshop principles I wanted to touch on before I turn it back to Anya. Please be respectful of other viewpoints, keep a statewide perspective, and propose ideas in a public setting. Thank you all for joining us today.
Okay, so our agenda for today, we will just do some brief introductions and a brief program overview, and then we'll do a recap of the kickoff workshop, and then we'll move into some discussion items. So there's a couple new sections that we wanted to discuss with stakeholders, and then as time allows, we'll go over some of the guideline updates that fall under clarify language and reduce redundancies updates, and then we'll close out with our action items. Next slide.
Sorry, folks, we are having some technical difficulties on our end, but we'll keep it rolling. So I'm Jaden Gales. I'm also a Staff Services Manager on the Active Transportation Program.
So I hope everybody can hear me. Okay, here we go. I think everybody can hear me now. Okay, so I'm Anya Allenbacher. I am the program manager for the Active Transportation Program. With me, I have Alika Chingizi, who's also a manager for the program, and Jaden Gales, also a program manager. And okay, so next slide. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Alika to do a quick overview of the Active Transportation Program.
Okay. Sorry, folks. Sorry about that. Okay. The Active Transportation Program overview. Okay, so I wanted to go over a couple of things. So the purpose of the program is to encourage increased use of active modes of transportation, such as walking and biking. In terms of the funding, each cycle includes 4 years of funding. So the 2027 in ATP will cover fiscal years 2027 through 28, 2028 to 29, 2029 and 30, and fiscal year 2030 through 2031. The available funding we're anticipating will be approximately 550 million. And you will see more concrete numbers as we go through our guidelines workshops. We will have a published fund estimate that will be coming forward in draft version in January and a final version in March. In terms of the distribution of funding, 50% of those funds are in the statewide component, 10% goes to the small urban and rural component, and 40% goes to the Metropolitan Planning Organization component. In terms of eligible agencies, you'll see that there are quite a few. So we have cities and counties, we have metropolitan planning organizations, regional transportation planning agencies, state and transit agencies, natural resources or public land agencies, public schools and school districts, tribal governments, and nonprofit tax exempt organizations. And in terms of eligible projects, we have, you'll see within the ATP, we fund infrastructure projects, meaning capital projects that will further the goals of the program. This typically includes environmental, design, right-of-way, and construction. We also fund plans, and these are plans that are focused on community-wide bicycle, pedestrian, safe routes to school, or active transportation plans. And these should encompass or be predominantly located within a disadvantaged community. You'll also see non-infrastructure projects are funded through this program. So these are really education and encouragement programs that further the goals of the ATP. And we'll also fund combination projects or infrastructure with non-infrastructure components. So these are capital projects with education or encouragement programs. In terms of the evaluation criteria, projects are evaluated for benefit to disadvantaged communities, the need for the project, the safety concerns, all of the engagement and public participation and planning that went into the scope of the project, as well as the scope and plan consistency question. You'll see in the large infrastructure application, those projects are evaluated also for innovation and the potential to be transformative. We also score on cost effectiveness and context sensitivity. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just giving a very, very high overview of the program. So you'll see here the first graphic here showing a little over 1,000 projects have been programmed for about 3.9 billion in active transportation funds since cycle 1. And then about 1.9 billion has been allocated as of fiscal year 24-25. And then the total project costs valued are valued at over 7.4 billion. Next slide, please. Okay, and I believe oh, no, this is still me, sorry. Okay, so for the kickoff workshop recap, we held our kickoff workshop on August 21st. So there were a couple things that we were able to finalize and talk through with all of our stakeholders. So the first thing we finalized was the 2027 program schedule. And then what we did was we opened up the workshop for stakeholder input on the guidelines. And so there were a few items that were brought to us through the stakeholders. And these items are listed on the slide, but they will be discussed in future workshops. So the first item is highlight the 2% cap for planned projects in the guidelines, to discuss the application process, also provide more guidance on the use of artificial intelligence in ATP applications, consider doubling the total points for all ATP applications, so 200 points versus 100, considering a two-step application process, considering cycle 7 evaluator feedback from the submittable application, as well as letters of support. So again, these are things that were brought to us by the stakeholder group. We have made note of these, and you'll also find these in the action items that are posted on the ATP website under the Cycle 8 tab. But we will be discussing these items as we progress through the ATP guidelines. And with that, I can take a quick pause to see if there are any questions before I hand things over to Anya. Not seeing any questions or hands raised.
Okay. So the first things that we wanted to bring up for discussion to you all are a couple of new sections. So if you go to the next slide, please. So the first section that I wanted to talk about is one that would be called funding restrictions. And so the reason for creating this section in the guidelines is to basically have one place for existing policies and funding restrictions that are currently scattered throughout the guidelines. So the existing policies and funding restrictions are not new. They've been in the guidelines. It would just be putting them all together in one place. And then this would also be a place to add policy that recognizes the new law regarding the Class 3 bikeways in the active transportation program. And then the second new section is to add Title VI requirements to the guidelines, and this is just to be consistent with other CTC programs, and just wanted to share the language of that with you. So we get started. The next slide, please. Okay, so the way that I thought to present the information to you is to kind of show you some of the track changes, so you can see that some of these policies are not new. They were just moved to this new section. So this section would basically start off with with some of the funding requirements that state highway, projects on the state highway system implemented by Caltrans require the Caltrans approved project report, and projects applying for funding in pre-construction phases must also apply for funding in the construction phase, except for those applications using the large infrastructure application, which is called out later on in the application type section. And then the section would be split into two sections. So one, the ATP will only fund, and then on the next slide, which we'll get to in a minute, it will be the ATP will not fund. So starting with what the ATP will fund, so basically the project scope has to have independent utility, and the projects must have a complete project study report or PSR or PSR equivalent. And like I said before, that's not new. And then, and so while we're talking about PSR equivalents, we will again have our PSR equivalency workshop in December. So I hope you all put that on your calendars to attend that one. But yeah, and then the other parts just talk about the feasibility studies. The project scope must further the purpose and goals of the ATP, and projects that meet the eligibility requirements specific to at least one ATP funding source, which is listed in the funding source section. So these are all kind of a mashup of things that have been scattered throughout the guidelines and are all put together in this section. So we can go to the next slide. So the next slide includes the new law regarding the class 3. So the new law is memorialized in the Streets and Highway Code, section 2384B and section 891.9. If you're interested in looking those up. And so the first bullet point states the ATP shall not fund a project that installs new sharrows on a roadway that has a posted speed limit greater than 30 miles per hour. And the second bullet is the Streets and Highway Code section 2384B, which says that the ATP will not fund a project that creates a class 3 bikeway unless any of the following three apply. The class 3 bikeway or marking is on a highway with a design speed limit of 25 miles per hour or less. The project will implement improvements to reduce the design speed limit to 25 miles per hour or less, or the project applicant demonstrates that the use of class 3 bikeway or marking is appropriate for the local community context and advances a lower stress environment or a low stress network. And then the other items that the ATP will not fund is projects that are proposing to use ATP funds to supplant other committed funds, ongoing or existing non-infrastructure projects, and the ATP does not fund cost increases. There is one exception, which is listed here, and the bullet points on the right-hand side of the slide are, again, all items that were previously in the guidelines and have just been added to this section. So I'm going to pause here for questions, comments.
Not seeing any questions or hands raised.
if there's any questions or anything that you think of later on, feel free to chime in. Happy to hear from you. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is another new section that we're proposing, which basically outlines the Title VI requirements. This section and the language in it is, we're proposing to include it to be consistent with other CTC guidelines or commission program guidelines. And the language is pretty standard, I think, across our other program guidelines. Okay, so that kind of concludes the new section, the new additions to the guidelines. So I'll pause again for questions or comments.
Not seeing any hands raised or questions coming in.
Okay. Let's move on to the next slide then. Okay. So with this section, we've set up the slides in a similar way where just kind of shows the red line based on the 2025 ATP guidelines and the changes that we're proposing. And unless we call it out, all of these changes are not changing or updating any policy. They're meant to make the existing policies more clear and use simple language. So you may see a lot of edits, but the point that we're really trying to achieve with these edits is to make the policies easier to understand and to make the guidelines easier to read. So wanted to set this section up for that. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so this section is the first one in the guidelines. Well, so it was the second section in the 2025 guidelines, and we're proposing to make it the first section to talk about the primary purpose of the ATP. And it of course lists all of the goals of the program, which are memorialized in the in statute. And the one thing I did want to get some feedback from, so you see the blue outlined paragraph. This was moved from the eligible project sections to here, since it seems to be talking about a programmatic goal that the commission set in the past. So my question to you is, should the commission continue to include funding transformative projects as a programmatic goal in terms of something that we want to call out and kind of highlight as a programmatic goal? And I'll just say too, like, you'll see that I crossed out the large, the word large in transformative projects. And that was really just to acknowledge that a transformative project doesn't have to be a large infrastructure project. I think since we added this programmatic goal to the guidelines several cycles ago, we've seen and programmed many projects small, medium, and large, that have been transformative in their communities. So I'll just stop talking and see if there's any feedback or comments on that.
Give it a few more seconds, not seeing anything come in at this time.
Okay.
Oh, we got one comment stating Slow Cog supports this updated language for those same reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, not seeing anything else.
All right, let's go on to the next slide. So again, with this slide, this is basically just outlining the authority of the program and the laws that put it into action. And it outlines the reason for the guidelines, which of course is to describe the policy, standards, criteria, and procedures for the development, adoption, and management of the program. So nothing new here in terms of adding any policies or anything. So I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so the next section is the program schedule, which, as Alika noted earlier, we went over the milestone dates at the kickoff workshop, and there seemed to be consensus on that the dates work for everyone. As we mentioned in the kickoff workshop, all of the milestone dates are based off of the dates that were in the program schedule for the 2025 ATP. So we're not proposing any changes, and it'll follow the same progression. Next slide. So we just kind of wanted to share the dates with you and some of the clarifying edits. One thing I did want to ask, so you'll see on this slide, we were proposing on breaking out the milestone dates for the MPO component into its own chart instead of having it spread throughout the milestone dates for the statewide and small urban and rural program. So I was hoping to maybe hear, oh, Carl, yeah, I was hoping to maybe hear from some MPOs, some feedback on whether or not this is a good idea, whether or not this is appreciated, and yeah, let's start with you, Carl.
Carl, go ahead.
All right. Hey, everyone. Carl Anderson with MTC. Thanks, Sonia. To answer your immediate question, yes, the splitting out the MPO milestones is appreciated, just so it's a lot easier for us to just go to one place and look at the schedule that is expected by CTC staff. It took me a second to kind of process the transformative change in your last slide, though. So I have that's why I raised my hand, and that's what I have a comment on. But do you want to wrap up the discussion here on this piece first before going back to that? What do you prefer?
No, that's fine. I think we can go back. Do you want to back up a couple slides? And then if we have more discussion on this one, we can move forward again.
Okay, so I fully recognize that, it's the commission's discretion to, figure out what they want to, prioritize in the ATP. But my concern here is that currently only the large project application has a specific question devoted to the transformative nature of the project. And so I'm curious if you, are removing the large word here, is the intention also to follow up and, add a question to the medium and small applications to get a better sense of why those projects would be transformative. I just want to make sure that, whatever we change in terms of the program priorities are also reflected in the applications themselves.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Thanks, Carl. So no, that was not the intention. And I think the intention of moving this paragraph from like the eligible projects to the goals was to acknowledge, some of the just the transformative nature of some of these projects that we fund, not necessarily to inform the review criteria. So yeah. I had not intended to bring up at a future workshop, adding a question to the medium small applications.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to be, conscientious of that.
Yeah,
If we are, changing the language here, if that has any impact on the applications themselves for our smaller and larger apps.
yeah, so that was not the intent, I think this was added at one point to to your point, to kind of start funding some of these larger projects that maybe do bike networks or like, are part of this larger thing. And so in my opinion, putting it here really just talks about not specific project types, but really just the transformative nature of active transportation projects.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Anya.
Yeah.
Okay, we also got a couple of comments come in the chat. Judy Weber states TMPO supports breaking out MPO component deadlines. And Sarkis also commented SBCAG supports breaking out the MPO deadlines.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next slide, and I will stop talking and let you have a break, and let Alika take over for a minute.
Thanks, Anya. Oh, we did get one question asking, would CTC consider adding a transformative type question to the small and medium applications?
So as I responded to Carl, that is not something that we had planned to do. Are you, Stephen, are you asking us to consider doing that? Or
go ahead.
I figured this was easier, but I think it would be helpful. Yeah, if we have a lot of small rural communities where, a $2 million investment in a downtown area has a huge transformative impact. And I'm not recalling anywhere in the smaller medium applications where there's maybe specific questions to why this is transformative. But so if I just put it out there, see if you maybe want to consider it.
okay, yeah. I think currently in the small and medium applications, agencies or applicants have been talking about that type of thing in the need question.
Or I guess if it's part of the scoring, right? Right. There's 5 points, I think, for the transformative question in the large.
Yeah. Okay.
But maybe it's already being considered as part of another question.
Yeah. So we'll make a note to circle back on that because I want to look at that. I'm not sure if it's mentioned in one of the other questions. Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, I will get started on this slide here. Okay, so to continue clarifying the clarify and simplified language, so you'll see this section is focused on section 4, which is now the funding and program cycle. And so previously it was, these were separate sections in the guidelines, and now they've just been combined. You'll see there's pretty minor text edits. So we moved the fund estimate information from the distribution section to this section. So that's a different part of the guidelines, but you'll see this is exactly what's always been. It's just been moved to a different part of the guidelines. And as I mentioned, we just merged the programming cycle with the funding overview section. And so we've moved also language that is shown in green to the new funding restrictions section. So that's why you'll see that's identified in green on this slide. Other than that, all of the information has remained the same. We've updated the fiscal years for the 2027 ATP. And yeah, that's pretty much it on this section here. So Jaden, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. Okay, so now focusing on the distribution section. So this has pretty much remained the same since previous cycles. There's a couple of text edits. We've consolidated some redundant statements and language. And then we moved fund estimate information to section 4. So that again is the funding and program cycle. So that's just what I went over. And then you'll see what was formerly section 9 in prior cycle guidelines, the funding for active transportation plans in disadvantaged communities. This has been deleted only because it's already stated in another part of the guidelines. So just removing that redundancy. And then we, again, merged the information from this section along with section 5, which is distribution. Okay, right, and then moving on to slide 22. Thank you, Jaden. Continuing with the distribution section. So this section will now start with the breakdown by component. So this slide is showing the text edits to the small urban and rural component and the statewide component. And so again, just deleting redundancies and just text edits on this part. And then Jaden, if you go to the next slide, you'll see there's a breakdown for the 40% for the MPO component. And so again, continuing with text edits under this section, I did want to flag that on the right-hand side, you'll see there's some green text. That's all been moved to the SCAG requirement, and that's all under the new MPO section.
Which we'll cover in a future workshop.
Yes, thank you, Anya. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Okay, this is the matching requirements section. As you'll see, edits are very minor, just text edits, and that's pretty much it. Going from cycle 5, excuse me, from cycle 7 to this cycle 8 iteration. Next slide, please. And now looking at reimbursement. So for this section, again, just minor text edits and reducing the redundancies. So we're not being repetitive throughout the guidelines. And that's the only text that was removed. Everything else is staying as is. Next slide, please. See, is this still me? Oh, I believe I'm turning things over to Anya. So before I do that, I can take a pause to see if there are any questions, comments. feedback from stakeholders. Okay. Anya, I'll hand things back over to you.
You. Okay, so the next section that we wanted to go over is the eligible applicants section. So again, this section is, well, so I should say, you'll see in the chart under the 2025 guidelines, this is discussing section 11, eligible applicants, and section 12, partnering with implementing agencies. And what we're proposing for cycle 8 guidelines is to basically merge the two sections together because we felt that they were relevant to each other. Next slide. So what we did here is just kind of streamlined the list of eligible agencies. And if you remember in the 2025 guidelines, the second eligible agency that's called out is Caltrans. And because the first one names local, regional, state agencies, and Caltrans is a state agency, we kind of just merged the relevant information about Caltrans applications into number 1. And that's the biggest change there. Next slide. Then again, we're not suggesting to change any of the eligible agencies, just kind of streamlining some of the information. Under number 5, tribal governments, the crossed out text, what we'll talk about in a future workshop is near the allocation section, we'll have a section that is going to be geared specifically towards tribal governments and the information that they will need in terms of allocating and contracting with Caltrans. And so like all of that information will be put together in that new section. And again, won't cover that today, but we'll go over that in a future workshop. Next slide. And then, so this is the partnering with implementing agencies that will just kind of be merged into the eligible agency section. So you'll see the text at the top that has the green outline. We moved that to the beginning of the section since it really applies to all eligible applicants. And then the text outlined in blue was redundant because there is a baseline section that includes this information later on in the guidelines. Next slide, please. Okay. Then the next section that we wanted to talk about is the eligible project types. Again, we're not planning to change any eligible project types. It will still be infrastructure projects and all phases of capital projects. You'll see the language that's outlined in blue is actually the information about PSR and PSR equivalencies. And so, as you recall, that was moved to the funding restrictions section. And then that green outline is the language about transformative projects that we covered earlier. So next slide. Okay. Oh, we have a hand. Okay, go ahead.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. Thanks, Anya. Going back to the eligible applicants slide, I think maybe one slide before this.
Yeah.
So actually, I guess it's kind of intertwined in a few of these slides. So last cycle, and forgive me if I'm getting too in the weeds, I don't want to waste time, but so let me know if we can just talk about this after at a later time. Last cycle, we did have an applicant apply for both the state and the regional program that did not have a master agreement.
Yeah.
And so I was curious, in my interpretation, it felt like it fell into a little bit of a gray area of like, should they have been ineligible to apply outright? Or if they, worked with Caltrans and signed a master agreement, let's say within a year before their project was eligible to receive their allocation, would we still allow them to, participate in the ATP program? And so I was curious what CTC's staff, what your take on that would be, or if we should articulate that in the guidelines.
Yeah.
I'll pause there.
So, no, that's great. And I don't think it's too in the weeds. I think it's good to talk about it. So, can you go to the next slide that has the partnering agencies or, yeah. So, the eligible applicants are outlined in the law, and so I don't see us making any updates to that. However, some of the edits that were made in this partnering with implementing agencies section is to clarify that if an eligible applicant, and so for example, this would be like the eligible nonprofit types or a school district that may perhaps not be able to enter into a master agreement with Caltrans. If that's the case and they're listed as an eligible applicant, they should partner with another eligible agency. So that's what the partnering with implementing agencies section is about, is to kind of cover that because of the contracting requirements with Caltrans, and then also accommodating that they are eligible to apply.
Yeah. And so if they do apply without partnering, would we give them, maybe a little bit of a grace period to either join in partnership with another jurisdiction or Caltrans, or a certain amount of time to enter into a master or to establish a master agreement with the state after the actual application's been submitted?
Yeah, so who was it that you're thinking of that wasn't able to enter into the agreement?
So I think, I'm not going to specifically call it out, but I think
Sure.
we had one nonprofit agency, and then we also had a city, I think, that had an expired master agreement or was unable to provide evidence of a master agreement. So those were the two examples that I came across
Okay.
last cycle.
Yeah, I think typically we've worked with them to get that in place. Now, Lori, you have some history here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess there's a difference between being eligible and being able to get a master agreement, because as you probably know, Carl, that both of the situations that you described, they are eligible.
Yeah.
The problem is, particularly for the nonprofit, is they have had difficulty getting master agreements through Caltrans, to be honest. So a lot of them have ended up being partnering with somebody else. But that should not be a barrier for them applying, though. So I think it's a good thing that maybe we could talk about with Caltrans a little bit to see if there's a way to make sure that agencies are eligible both legally and in reality, I guess.
Now talking through it, it almost seems like it's not necessarily language we need to add to the eligible applicants piece, but prior to allocation. or
Yeah.
prior to programming,
Yeah,
maybe.
because
Well, at
they-
the time of programming, we should
Yeah.
start figuring this out, yeah.
Yeah, because ultimately my issue last cycle solved itself because they just weren't the top performing projects. So I didn't really, have to ring the fire alarm to figure out how to deliver the project, but it's just on my mind now. And
So Anya, I say that would be an action item for us to talk to Caltrans
Yeah.
about if there's been improvements on the timelines for getting master agreements.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. No, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
And I did have one more question, I think related to shop funds. I thought I saw a paragraph where there was some shop language, maybe 1 or 2 slides before this one.
Yeah, just 2 slides prior. Yep. So the shop language is always been in there, and it's basically that when Caltrans nominates a project, they must show that it's consistent with local and regional priorities, and that no other fund source is available for the project, for example, shop funds.
Okay. And maybe this is a question for, Caltrans staff on the call, but I can't remember. Can shop funds be used for active transportation style improvements outside of Caltrans right of way?
No,
Okay.
I mean, I don't think so.
I just can't remember because I'm just trying to think in the whole context of partnering with other agencies, et cetera. So yeah, sorry. I haven't really fully formulated my thought there. I guess I just wanted to bring it up. I don't know. Disregard it.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident in saying that shop funds must be for projects on the state highway system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and we do have an additional comment in the chat. Looks like this is coming from Rachel Ohm. She writes that SCAG awarded an MPO component project to an eligible applicant without a master agreement. That awardee is currently in the process of establishing a master agreement before they allocate their funding. We programmed the project in a later fiscal year to allow for more time to establish a master agreement. So thank you for adding that context, Rachel. And it looks like we do have an additional comment from Alyssa stating correct, shop funds must be used on the state highway system. Thank you, Alyssa. And that looks like that's all of our comments at the time.
Okay, we do have another hand raised.
Keith, you are unmuted and free to provide your comment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on whoever just asked the question about whether shop funds could be used on the state highway, and it seemed like there was a pretty clear answer of no. But I did want to just throw out a unique situation to see if this might apply. What if it's a section of highway where cycling is not allowed, and there could be an opportunity for parallel facilities that are not on the state highway for whatever, length until the highway does allow cycling again.
What's your question? Is the question, is that shop eligible? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the question.
No, it's not. That's beyond the state highway.
Yeah.
We've actually had those situations where we've had projects that were partially on the state highway and then partially on local roads. And we had to be clear on what part shop was funding and what part the ATP funds were funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Any other? We did have one more comment. Want to read that, Jaden?
Yes, we did have an additional comment from Ginger stating, wonder if the shop rules might change in light of SB 960. So thanks for that comment, Ginger. If you want to elaborate a little bit more on that in the comments, we'll definitely read those out, but that currently concludes our written comments.
Okay. All right, so let's see, let's move on to, let's see, where did we? Slide 31.
So we.
Yeah, this one, that's right. Oh, yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, great. So Stephen, you are unmuted and free to provide your comment.
Thanks. This is Stephen Hondemeyer with SlowCog. I don't know if I'm asking the question at the right place, but that discussion of shop funding had me thinking, when it comes to, the intersection of a state highway system and the local road system, we have a situation, or there's been situations where there's a minor A funded operational and safety project at that intersection. And we've always looked for opportunities to leverage those types of projects to implement larger multimodal infrastructure projects. Would an applicant be able to, if it weren't Caltrans, would be able to identify those minor A funds as part of their overall match?
So, no, because shop funds are allocated through the commission and you can't use funds that are allocated through the commission for leveraging unless it's the STIP, the State Highway Improvement Program funds. Yeah, those are the
Right.
only project-specific funds that are allowed.
Okay, I'm remembering that. No, I appreciate that.
Maybe you could explain to them why. Because we're going outside. To leverage.
Yeah, so the thoughts behind the leveraging funds is to encourage applicants to leverage either local funds, or if they're a self-help county, to leverage measure funds, if or maybe even leverage federal funds. And so those are, kind of what we hoped for in terms of leveraging funds. Obviously, as noted in our section, those aren't the only funds that are allowed, but yeah, if they're state funds, they can't be allocated through the commission. That's kind of commission program-wide rule.
And the reason we allow STIF is that in a way, STIF is their fund.
Right.
So it is like putting in their own funds then.
Yeah.
So even though they come through commission.
That's right. Okay. All right, so moving along, so with the eligible projects, the previous slide was about infrastructure projects. This slide shows some of the clarification of the information for plans and the non-infrastructure projects. So again, we're not changing, for example, for the plans, we're not changing any of the funding priorities that have been included in previous guidelines. And for the non-infrastructure projects, we're not also not changing any of the eligibility. Next slide. Okay, and then again, so the fourth type of eligible project is a combination of infrastructure and non-infrastructure. And again, just clarifying the language on this one. And then you'll see quick builds is in there. And as we noted in the kickoff workshop, that is something that we wanted to talk about in a future workshop. So we will circle back to that. Next slide. Okay, Alika, I'm gonna hand it to you.
Great. Thank you, Anya. Okay, so I will be covering the next few slides of sections that we're making minor edits to. So this one is a little bit more than a minor edit. So this is the Justice 40 Initiative section. You'll see here, everything is in strikeout. So these tools that we utilize were provided during the Biden-Harris administration and are no longer available on those federal sites. So for that reason, this section is now being removed. And just as I know we talked about this a lot last cycle when we added this language, but just to kind of recap, the ATP historically has exceeded the 40% milestone required by the initiative. ATP is more so in like the 90s in terms of percentage of funds that benefit or investments that benefit disadvantaged communities. So this section will be deleted from the Cycle 8 guidelines. Next slide, please. Okay, so next we'll focus on the application submittal requirements. So this was previously Section 18. It is now moved up to Section 14. There's some redundancies that we've taken out and we've clarified and simplified a lot of the language here. I'll be kind of continuing on this section in the next few slides, so you'll see more of that continued. Jaden, would you mind going to the next slide, please? Okay, so for this part of Section 14, we deleted information that was not relevant to choosing an application type. So that information is elsewhere throughout the guidelines. And then in terms of the quick build language, you'll see here, and as Anya touched on her previous slide, the quick build section is highlighted. And the reason for that is that there will be updates, we'll be discussing the quick build pilot program in a future workshop. But there will be updates because the quick build application is currently not available and submittable, and we plan to continue that effort. And so right now the quick build application is separate, and the submission requirements are a bit different. So we wanted to hold off on that discussion until a future workshop. Other than that, again, reducing redundancies, clarifying and simplifying language here. Next slide, please.
And Alika,
yeah.
if I could just add real quick, I wanted to also point out that the dollar amounts for the small, medium, and large infrastructure projects are not going to change. We're not proposing to change them.
Thanks, Anya. Okay, so continuing with Section 14, you'll see here again, we're reducing the redundancies, clarifying some of the language. We moved some information out that is not relevant to this section. So those are some of the green strike through that you see. It's been moved to another section. And then you'll see on the right-hand side, we in the green outline, or excuse me, on the left-hand side, we moved to the top of the section. And so, let's see. Okay, sorry about that. My notes just kind of went away. Okay, so the green text, as I mentioned, has been moved to the top of this section. The deleted requirements are included in the application itself or other parts of these guidelines. And so any sort of information from previous guidelines under this section have remained here. The language has just been simplified and reduced. And with that, I will take a pause to see if there are any questions or comments. Okay, not seeing any come in. Anya, I believe I'm handing things back over to you.
Sure. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So nothing is changing in this section, which is the minimum request for funds. Just the crossed out text is going to be moved to the new MPO component section that we'll talk about later on, or at another workshop, I should say. Next slide. And then pretty much the same changes here. The green outline was specific to the MPO component, and so that information is going to be moved out of this section and into the MPO component section. And then the only big difference for this one is that we moved this state-only funding section from where it was in programming to the project application section. Next slide. Okay, so with the project selection process, again, just clarified and kind of streamlined the language that we were not suggesting a change in the project selection process, just kind of streamlining the information on how we currently do it, which is basically a sequential selection process where all of the applications are competitively evaluated, and then the highest scoring applications are programmed in the statewide component, and then the remaining projects are become eligible for funding in either the small urban and rural component or the MPO component based on their location. So it's really just clarifying that same process. Next slide. So this is the screening criteria. So this, in the 2025 guidelines, this section was living in the eligibility section, and we are proposing to move it to the project selection process section. So really what we did here is just clarified the language. I do want to also point out that we crossed out language saying that we will not evaluate applications that don't meet this screening criteria, because that has not been true for several cycles now. We review every application, and every application we receive gets a score. So that's really the biggest change in this section, is aligning the guidelines language with what we actually do. Next slide, I think, has the rest of this section. And in that last paragraph, you can see the crossed out sentence that I was just talking about. I'll pause here for questions, comments. Next slide.
The only thing, Anya, is if they use the wrong application. Because I don't think consumable, I don't know, I think it's submittable, they can still use the wrong application, right? I think.
I thought they
think
were
it
still scored, but with the correct scoring rubric, and so.
I think if you're going between like a infrastructure only and a combination, if I remember correctly, I believe there's something that will halt them if they don't respond to the NI portion. And then it'll recommend them switching to an infrastructure only.
But what if it's a large project and they try to use the small application?
I'm not sure about
Yeah,
that.
'cause
I
that
can
was the
double
problem.
check.
So when we were using the Caltrans one,
Yeah,
it wouldn't let him do it, but I think we were having trouble. with
Okay.
that on small.
Okay.
I'll make note of it.
Okay, so that's a good point, Larry. So, so we'll look at that, and then, if submittable doesn't stop applicants from using the incorrect infrastructure application, then we'll add that back in as something we screen out.
Yeah, I can't remember, Beverly might have figured out some way to screen it. but
Yeah, I
but
remember
can't
talking
remember.
about it, but
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it would be hard, if they can, that, it's hard to score it,
mhm.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, because you're not answering the
yeah,
correct
yeah.
questions. Yep. Okay. Okay, so we may come back to that section. Okay. All right. Okay, so this is the section that talks about the evaluator team process, which again is not changing. We've just streamlined some of the language on the process that we're currently using. And yeah, so next slide. And then the last part of the project evaluation process section is about the scoring rubrics. And the only part, well, it's partially highlighted, is the date when we will publish the scoring rubrics, which will be the date that we covered earlier in the project schedule. So typically we will publish the scoring rubric for each application type after the commission adopts the guidelines, which is at their March commission meeting. Next. Okay. So now we come to my favorite section. So this is the project delivery section. So in the 2025 guidelines, the allocations process had its own part, I guess, section. And so what we've done is made it a subsection, section 29 of the larger part called project delivery. And then project delivery includes the allocations, the timely use of funds, and the program amendments, which covers items like the scope changes and the other amendments that are allowed in the program. So the biggest changes here are really just clarifying the language and making these sections and the language in them consistent with other commission guidelines, specifically the SB1 program. So those of you who are familiar with the SB1 program guidelines, you'll recognize kind of the formatting and the language of the section is set up to be similar, at least. I will say we're not proposing any changes. There are some things that are allowed in ETP that are different in SB1, so we are not changing anything that is currently allowed in ETP. That will all stay the same. So next slide. I think I talked over some of these slides. Yeah, so this is the allocation review process. And again, like, so this is just formatting to kind of make it a little easier to read. Next slide. And then these are the requirements for allocation. And again, basically just formatting these items into a list so that they're easier to find and easier to identify, and deleted a lot of redundancies in this section as well. So again, none of these items have changed. These are all what is currently required. Next slide. Yeah, so just continuing on with the list, and then on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll notice that construction phase allocations, there's some additional requirements, and so that's why those are pulled out. Next slide. Okay, these are just some of the that were deleted. So next slide. Okay, so the next section is the timely use of funds section. So again, this section was formatted and the language updated to be consistent with other commission guidelines. As those of you familiar with several commission programs know, the timely use of funds policy is pretty consistent across all of our programs. There are, of course, some differences in the ATP, and those are still the same. But the big change here is that the timely use of funds is now two-section. This first section talks about what the deadlines are and what the expectations are in terms of the delivery of projects. Next slide. So it's the deadlines for all the different project milestones, and then the 10-year requirement for projects to complete their construction is called out here. Next slide. And then the second timely use of funds section talks about the extensions, the time extensions that are allowed in the program. So this slide and the next slide kind of formatted into a list all of the requirements that we have for when a time extension can be requested, and the things that need to be submitted in order to receive a time extension. And then also on the right of the slide here, you see the different time extensions that can be requested. And again, there's no changes for the ATP here. You're still able to request 20 months for an allocation time extension and 12 months for every other type. And I think that was the end of, yeah, that was it. So I'll stop there. Any questions, comments, feedback?
Any of this.
Well, so Celestine, we will post a PDF of this, the slides after today, after this workshop. And so yeah, you'll just look on our website and you'll be able to download a copy there.
We do have a written comment from Tyrese. This says, he asks, is this allocation awarded upfront, like a lump sum, or is this a reimbursement type of grant?
Yeah, so this is, the ATP is a reimbursement grant, and the allocation is separate for each project phase. So, for example, for an infrastructure project, if you receive funds for environmental and design and construction, you would have to allocate each one of those phases separately. And then the allocation section outlines what needs to happen before you can allocate those phases.
Okay, and then I did put a link in the chat where you will find the presentation as well as the recording of today's workshop. That should be up, I would say, probably early next week. Yeah.
Yeah,
a hand
we have another hand. Yeah.
Sarkis, you are unmuted and free to make your comment.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Would this be the right time to, sorry, I'd like to go back to that first slide you guys had about stakeholder input on the two-part application whenever you have a chance.
Oh, yeah. I think that was on the kickoff recap.
Yeah, I think it was like slide 7.
Slide 9.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand in time when you guys first had the slide up.
No, that's okay. We have plenty of time, so let's talk about it.
Can you elaborate on what the two-step application process is? Is that like a pre-application and the full application or something different?
Yeah, so that is something that had been brought up by a stakeholder as something that they wanted us to consider in terms of a discussion. So yes, I believe that was what had been proposed, was that there be some kind of like letter of interest or something like that that's submitted, and then applicants would be invited to, or agencies would be invited to apply as like step 2. I believe that that's kind of what the suggestion was.
Okay, and this will be a future discussion topic?
Yeah, I mean, we had a few requests to talk about different types of items that were all kind of related to the application. But I mean, if you have, you know, yeah, I mean, is there like a comment or before?
I mean,
you wanted
just
to bring up?
I don't, if it's fine now, we for our sales tax measure, we have a pre-application requirement and then the full application submitted later. So for you to submit the full application, you have to submit a pre-application. And that gives the applicants an idea of what's being requested. But I guess I'm the idea of invitation to apply. I don't know if I support that idea. I think I feel like it's up to the applicant of whether they want to be able to apply for a public funding program. So that would be my feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarkis. Yeah, you know, Since that was suggested, I've kind of been trying to figure out what that would look like. And that was exactly a concern that we had was we didn't want to shut anybody out from applying to the ATP, you know. We really feel very strongly that everybody should have a chance.
But the pre-application, I mean, we'd support it. It gives people an idea of what the demand is, compared to what the available funding is. And it's probably another way to advocate for more funding for ATP, just, you know, upfront. I know you guys do that already, but yeah, so the pre-app would be a good idea. And it's a very simple pre-application. It's just like a one pager, nothing too extensive.
Okay, so they submit the pre-application and then later on they submit a full application, or
Yes.
how?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so there's like no screening out or anything that happens with the pre-application?
No, it's more to let our board know what the interest is in the funding programs.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarkis. Any other questions or comments or feedback on anything? We have time if anybody has something they want to bring up.
Stephen, you're unmuted and free to make your comment.
Hi, thanks, Jaden. I'm wondering, this had me thinking about the large infrastructure projects where you said you can apply for pre-construction only. Is that also sort of a two-step application where in the future they would be applying for construction funds?
It's not a two-step application. So the large infrastructure projects, so they have the option to apply only for pre-construction funds, and that's really to accommodate like a longer than 4-year construction schedule. Because the ATP funds, you know, environmental on through, and on some of these larger projects, the pre-construction can sometimes take, you know, 3 to 4 years or more. So it's really to accommodate that. However, they don't receive priority in a future cycle, so they can apply for ATP funds for the construction phase in a future cycle, but you know, they go through the competitive process.
Oh, okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah. So there was another.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have a written comment from Tyrese. He asked, I don't know if this was just touched on, but are draft applications and pre-review doable prior to official application submittal?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. We don't actually review draft applications. However, we do offer site visits. So that's basically where we can hear about your project and the ideas for you have for applying. And, you know, a lot of times in those site visits, agencies also talk to us about like concerns they have in terms of answering specific questions or getting clarification on how they should address certain things. So we do offer, you know, that type of touch point, I should say, maybe for your application, but we don't actually review your drafts.
Have someone else review them.
Yeah,
That's a
so
good suggestion.
Yeah, so you can have someone else review it. There are some MPOs or other regional transportation agencies that that do offer that for their regions, and so you might reach out to see if there's somebody that does that. Yeah, so thank you, Rachel. So Rachel noted that applicants in the SCAG region can connect with your county transportation commission and SCAG for support and review of your application. And I believe Santa Barbara also does that. Sarkis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I
think MTC.
and MTC does that. So yeah, check with your region. And then does that.
Rachel.
Yeah, I read it. Okay. So Shelley asked, the ATP webpage says the October 1st workshop will be hybrid. So it's the October 18th
16th.
workshop. 16th, sorry. The October 16th workshop will be hybrid in Merced. So it will, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. We'll check the website, make sure that information is correct. Yeah, so the October 16th workshop will take place the morning before the commission meeting, and it will be in Merced. Right. Thank you, Sarkis. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Jaden to do our workshop recap and point out some of the action items we heard. If there are additional comments or questions or anything after that, we will stay on and happy to continue talking. So Jaden, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Anya, and thank you everyone for your feedback and comments today. We really appreciate your attendance in our workshop. And I took note of several comments and questions that were made. I have 2 action items listed from today's workshop. The first being that CTC staff will consider adding criteria to the small and medium infrastructure applications pertaining the transformative nature of the project, similar to the large infrastructure applications. So that's something we will take a look at. And the other action item I have listed here is CTC staff will work with Caltrans regarding the master agreements and discuss, the process of how efficiently those are being processed to see if there's any additional efficiencies we can create there. So those are the 2 I have listed from today's workshop. If folks online feel that there's additional action items that I may have not taken account for, please feel free to add that to the chat. But I think those are our 2 main takeaways from today's discussion. Give you guys a second to. Okay, looks like we do have an additional action item. So in terms of submittable, we will look into a submittable. So yeah, we'll look into submittable and make sure that essentially it's bulletproof to where you cannot submit the wrong type of application. We'll try to do some maybe pre-questionnaires to ask how much funding are you looking for, and maybe that can steer you to the right application type to really make it bulletproof and kind of get around those errors that we might see. And additionally, let's see, the 2-step application process is something we'll look into as well. So yeah, thank you all for your questions and comments today. Again, if I missed something, please feel free to add that in the comments, and we will consider that on our action item list today. Right, and we'll go to the next slide. So I did want to mention, in terms of next steps, so our next central workshop will be September 17th, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., so earlier than our prior sessions. The focus, again, will still be on the guidelines. But additionally, I did want to mention our October 1st workshop. We will be discussing non-infrastructure at that October workshop, October 1st. Again, you will find that information on our website. It'll be a really great session. We'll have some staff from the ATRC on the call, and it'll be very informative, again, to discuss non-infrastructure projects in the ATP. You will find a link to register for the September 17th workshop in this presentation, which we will post shortly after our workshop. They should be available early next week online once that processes. And again, thank you all for attending our workshop today. Our staff contact information is listed here. Please feel free to reach out to any one of us, and we are more than happy to address any questions, comments, or feedback you might have. Anything else from you?
We got one more question. Are the timeframes for the virtual site visits available on the website? Oh, yeah, do you want to just maybe give a quick plug for signing up for branch workshops and site visits?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So we are working on developing a registration form for the branch workshops as well as the site visits. Those should be available very shortly. We are admittedly a little behind on posting those than we'd like to be. But when it comes to the branch workshop, we are working closely with the ATRC, and we're trying to incorporate some information with the ATRC to bundle it with our branch workshops. Essentially, the ATRC will be offering bike and walk audits, which will be a really great opportunity for various agencies. And we want to include all that information in our registration form, so we're really being efficient with the way we process our information and gather that. So the branch workshops and site visit information will be available shortly. In terms of the branch workshops, we will be taking we'll be taking requests for a branch workshop until November. So there will be a window to apply. Once we get those requests fully submitted and the period closes, we'll reach out to schedule these branch workshops. And in terms of the site visits, those will also be available. We are offering, I believe it's Tuesdays and Thursdays for our site visits. And we'll have several hours available on those days where we can do virtual site visits and give you some feedback on some of those proposed projects you might have. But again, engagement will close in March when we begin the call for projects. So definitely stay on the lookout for those registration forms. We're really hoping to get them out ASAP, hopefully early next week is the goal, and there'll be a lot of helpful information in there. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. And again, our contact information is listed on the slide in front of you today.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat. Thank you all for coming today and listening and providing your feedback and your comments. Always appreciated, and we love to hear from you. So we'll stay on for a few more minutes in case there's any other questions that come up. That was all we had for you today.
Okay, so we did have one additional written question. This comes from Juliana. Are each of the guideline workshops sharing different information?
I can chime in here. Juliana, thank you for the question. Yes, so the workshops will be focused on the guidelines. However, we'll be talking about different guideline items throughout the remainder of the workshops that we have left. There will be 2 workshops that we currently have tentatively scheduled that are part of this workshop process, but will not be focused on the guidelines. One will be focused on the applications and the other will be focused on the scoring rubrics. I believe both of those will take place in 2026. One workshop will be held in January and the other will be in February.
Yeah, and the guidelines workshops are iterative, so we will not come back to any of the information that we talked about in this workshop unless there is a reason to have further discussion. All right, so I think we've reached the end of all the questions. And so thank you all for coming again, and we will see you at the next workshop.